Hello and welcome back to the MLB DFS Slate Breakdown for Friday, May 17th. We got a big slate here, 13 games. There are some weather spots where we need to worry about, so make sure you check that before lock. Now, before we jump into it, come join us at LineStar. $39.99 per month gets you access to everything we do, all the props, all the DFS. You get it all, one low price. Come join us, come get in the fun, let's make some money, and now let's check out this beautiful slate we got here today. Happy Friday, everyone, and before we get into the slate, we're going to go over yesterday's perfect lineups, the winning lineups from both Fanduel and Draftkings, and then pitchers to consider for today, as well as stacks. Yesterday's perfect lineup on Fanduel, Christian Javier. You know, I talked down to him yesterday. His K rate has been way lower for the last year and a half than it was. But yesterday, in 80 pitches, super efficient, only walks one batter. He goes and Ks 8 guys in 6 innings of work. Congrats to Javier. You had a great game. Made me eat my words. Meanwhile, two-man Boston stack. Elly De La Cruz just went absolutely nuts, putting up 55. Guy is just stealing bases like an absolute madman these days. And after that, you know, all one-offs. And the winning lineup went to OCD OBV with Javier, a 3-man Cincy stack, and a 3-man Boston stack with a one-off of Dodgers and Cubs. Pretty different lineup construction here than we're used to, as it is a 3-3-1-1. Don't really see that much. I don't think it's being played much, so it is kind of interesting to take note on that aspect, just because it's a lineup construction that not many people are playing. So when you have a slate like yesterday where there was one team put up 7, and then the next highest run total is like 5, it's a really situation where this can happen. Yesterday did happen to be where Cincinnati, who was, you know, the least owned stack on the slate, was the one that had the most runs. So it was, you know, a very different slate than what we're used to. But regardless, congrats to OCD OBV. You got it done. Now let's check out the DraftKings one. All right, so we got Christian Javier. We have Nick Martinez. Nick Martinez just shut out the Dodgers, had a great game there. And then we have a 2-man Boston stack here as well. Elly De La Cruz is also in this lineup. No surprise, putting up 44 on DK. When you have 4 stolen bases, you have a double, you have 3 runs, it tends to happen. What's crazy is he even got caught stealing once. So he tried for 5 bags yesterday. A pretty wild game. Congrats to Elly. And the winning lineup on DraftKings went to Aaron Costa. I did want to bring up that OCD was 4th on DK also. So he had quite a day. Aaron Costa in first, though, in his lineup, he had Javier, he had Jared Jones. Both had decent games. Jones did get hit a little bit, gave up 3 runs, but was still able to be in the perfect lineup just because of that strikeout upside and 6 Ks. Now his lineup, 5-man Pittsburgh, 2-man Boston with that one off from Cincy. So once again, every day this week, 5-2-1 has won it on DraftKings. It is absolutely the lineup construction that wins the most on DraftKings. So definitely take note of that. But yeah, Pittsburgh scored 5. Boston scored 5. Cincinnati had 4, mostly due to Elly. So Aaron Costa, you kind of crushed that lineup. Congrats. Now let's get into today. As always, starting off with pitchers, big thing to watch is this this Padres and Braves game. If you guys are familiar with LineStar, you know I am a Padres fan. Ryan Humphreys is a Braves fan, so We are not friends the next couple days. It is war, but we both might get a break today, as it does look like there's a decent chance of that game not playing. We do have a few other weather spots to worry. I'm not going to go into that too much just because it's early and so much can change throughout the day, but make sure you pay attention to weather. All right, now our highest owned pitcher on DraftKings, Nestor Cortez, Nasty Nestor, 22% owned, 9.4K. And it's just against the lowly White Sox, who have just been awful versus lefties. 0.93 ISO, 253 WOBA. They're hitting 230 versus Nestor and 35 plate attempts, but if you take that out to 52 plate attempts, they're only hitting 196 off him. So I think he's in a really good spot. He's been pitching well, 3.38 FIP over his last 5 starts with a 25% K rate. StatCast data is a little worrisome. He's allowing 36% hard contact and 54% fly balls. Don't love to see that, but Nestor has been much better at home, averaging 22% more fantasy points at home. Now, I like Nestor. I think he probably should be the chalkiest spot on the slate, but with this many games, it's not likely that he's going to get so chalky that I wouldn't consider playing him. I think he's definitely firmly in the pitcher pool, and I will have some. Jesus Luzardo is next. So Luzardo came out through 79 pitches in his first start off IL last time, so we would expect him to be able to pitch a little bit more than that. And the Mets have been decent versus lefties, 327 WOBA, 183 ISO. Meanwhile, Luzardo hasn't been great to start the year, 4.49 FIP over the last 5 with a 6.41 ERA. Now, the big worry here, or the big thing to notice here, is that ERA is so much higher. So I do expect some regression for him to the positive side. And there is some strikeout upside here with 26% K rate over his last 20 spots. Now, StatCast data has been a little worrisome. A lot of fly balls, 44%, 33% hard contact, but at least he's keeping the barrels down. There's also been a decent amount of line drives and very little soft contact. Meanwhile, the Mets have hit him well. 71 plate attempts. They're hitting 266. Only 2 home runs at least. So they're not, hitting him hard, but they are getting on base. 311 WOBA, 24% K rate. I think at 7,400, you could definitely take your chance at Luzardo. He's an interesting piece. His price is way lower than it really should be in how he was pitching last year. So if he is able to get to some of that form back, he becomes very interesting today at this price. Next, we got Tariq Skubal. This guy has absolutely been insane this year. 1.52 FIP over his last 5, 1.99 ERA, 32% K rate. But Arizona is good versus lefties. Only strikeout 18.6%, 357 WOBA, 172 ISO. So they're getting on base. They're hitting the ball hard. Makes it a little harder to go to Skubal, but he is absolutely one of the best pitchers on this slate, and a 27 or 26.8% combined K rate makes it interesting in a spot I definitely would consider at a little lower ownership with 17% ownership here on DraftKings. Next, we got Cole Ragans. I'm definitely on board with Ragans. There's a lot of up and down with him so far this year. So first, let's start on the matchup. Oakland, 26% K rate versus lefties. Low WOBA, 130 ISO. All of that looks great. I love the spot for Ragans versus Oakland. Now, 2.5 FIP over his last 20 starts. Amazing. Over his last 5, 3.07. Amazing. Now, here's the weird part. ERA is 6.3 over his last 5 starts, largely because Baltimore jumped on him for 7 runs in 1.2 innings, and then the Angels got him for 7 in 6.1 innings. So those 2 starts are really bringing it down. The other 3 starts in this last 5, he pitched pretty well. So that shows the huge difference between ERA and FIP. He has been pitching better than that ERA shows. So I'm absolutely considering him, even though his ERA has ballooned up a little bit. 30% K rate over his last 20 starts, 25% over the last 5. I definitely think he can have a very good game against Oakland. He's also at home, which helps. Just a little more comfortable there at home. So I like Reagans and definitely going to have some of him. Next, Chris Bassett. Now, Bassett is a guy that I'm definitely interested in. Also, it should note that Reagans 2.4x leads our value. Next, Chris Bassett 2.2x at only 7.2K is super interesting to me. So he's versus the Rays, strikeouts. So they strike out a lot versus righties. They do hit the ball hard versus righties, but Bassett's been very, very good versus them. 51 plate attempts. They're only hitting 213, have 2 home runs, 191 ISO, 25.5% K rate. If he's able to get that 25.5% K rate and keep runs from scoring, he looks super, super interesting today at 7.2K. I absolutely like going here. I'm very interested in Bassett. He is a guy that we have seen when he's pitching well has, a huge ceiling. Even though his K rate is only 22.8 or 20% over the last 5, what we always see is in those games where he's pitching well, he's an 8K, 12K, 7K kind of guy. So he does have that ability to work efficiently, work into the 7th or 8th inning, and rack up those Ks, even though his K rate is a little lower than some of the guys. But he's only 7.2K, so he's also a value in this spot. I'm interested in him for sure, and one of the guys that I will be taking next. We got Kyle Harrison, 8.2K. Now, I think Harrison versus Colorado in San Francisco is a great matchup for Harrison. One, they're terrible versus lefties. 118 ISO, 262 WOBA. We know Colorado struggles away from home. They strike out a lot versus lefties. Harrison's been good lately, 3.04 FIP. The opponent splits aren't great for him, and Team VP is great in Harrison's favor. Also, Harrison is much better versus one side. One-handedness, which we're probably going to see a lot of today. So I think the splits work in Harrison's favor. I think there's a lot of going for Harrison, and he's lower owned at only 8.2K. I think he's somebody that's going to fly under the radar a little bit that I am interested in. So I definitely like that. Next, we got Max Fried, who's just been pitching great lately. Versus the Padres. Warning with a weather situation here. Padres do hit lefties very hard, and Fried has been much worse at home, but Padre offense hasn't been working that great. I'm a little interested. Do got to bring up the fact that he has a 3.89 FIP over his last 5 and only a 1.85 ERA. Likely some regression coming there at some point. And just a low combined K rate here for 20% versus Fried. Don't love the spot for Fried, but you could do worse. Andrew Heaney versus the Angels. Hey, Angels been a pesky offense lately. They keep just kind of getting it done, but Heaney just keeps kind of getting it done too. 25% K rate over his last 5, 3.64 FIP. Definitely intrigued with some Heaney here. His StatCast data is scary though. 49% fly balls, a lot of barrel balls, and Angels have hit him well in the past, but only a 26% or 26 plate attempt sample size, so very, very small sample size. Wouldn't take a ton into that. But at only 6.6K, 2.3x, I think he's interesting and definitely would consider going there, as I would Christian Scott. He is a guy that I was on big time versus Tampa Bay here. Don't think I played him versus Atlanta, but look, 2.7 FIP through his 2 starts, 26% or 28% K rate. Does allow 60% fly balls, but it's soft contact, or not hard contact, 21% hard contact. So I'm absolutely intrigued to go to Christian Scott here. Pitch count wise, 94, 91, so I'm not too worried about his pitch count. The Miami Marlins aren't very good. There is a decent combined K rate. I think Scott is interesting at lower owned. Got to bring up Paxton because his FIP is 5.12, but his ERA over his last 5 is 2.69. He just can't keep getting away with that big of a difference from his FIP and ERA. It is going to catch up to him. Does it happen today? Maybe. Cincinnati's hitting the ball well. They're playing the Dodgers tough right now. I'm off Paxton, but I want to bring him up because I am interested in Cincinnati a little bit. Freddie Peralta. He is one of the best pitchers on the slate. It's him and Skubal for probably the two best guys. 2.86 FIP over his last 20, 3.74 over his last 5. He's been pitching better than the results show lately. We know he has a solid K rate, 35% over his last 20 starts. And StatCast data is fine. He allows a ton of soft contact, so that fly ball rate doesn't scare me that much. And Houston's been a little hit or miss offensively, so I don't mind trying to pick on Houston a little bit with Freddie Peralta. Yeah, they have some guys that can really hit, but like some of these good lineups, it is if the back half of the lineup doesn't come through, then the team doesn't score that many runs, and that's kind of what has to happen with the Astros. The back half of their lineup needs to hit, or else it's hard for them to really put up a big run total. So I think Houston's in an interesting spot, and I wouldn't be that scared off with the quality of pitcher that Freddie Peralta is. Outside of that, we're just going to get over to FanDuel here, to FanDuel, because I don't really want to bring up anybody else. Value-wise, they're just not really getting there, and there's so many pitcher options today that we can just get lost in the weeds. So, Fanduel Pitchers, we got Reagan's highest owned, 41% owned. That is wild, but we do have the highest value on him. He's the highest projection, highest consensus projection. Makes sense that ownership is going to go there. Nasty Nestor is right there. There's just more people going to Reagan's because Cortez is pretty much the same price. So I understand why Cole has more ownership than Nasty Nestor Cortez. Next, we got Skubal, 10.9K, so 1.3 more than, 1.3, 1.4 more than those two guys, coming in at quite a bit less owned. Definitely intrigued to go to Skubal in this situation. But like I said, tough Diamondbacks offense. They are very good versus lefties. Freddie P, he is a very interesting one. It's a versus good offense, but nobody's going there. And we know he can break a slate. He's cheaper than Skubal, not much more than Reagan's, but we know he can produce versus anybody. So absolutely intrigued with him. Jesus Luzardo at 8.44K has got to be interesting. He has the upside to get it done. Not the best spot in the world for him, but absolutely intriguing. Brian Bello has been very solid lately. Only thing with him that I worry about is his K rate just isn't that high. We have a combined K rate for 23.8%. And it's his birthday. We got a birthday game. Let's see if he pitched on his birthday last year. Nope. Oh, no. Yeah, he did. 5 innings, 7 Ks, 5 walks. Put up 39 last year on his birthday. So, did well last year on his birthday. Intrigued by Bello. Cardinals offense has been kind of hit or miss. They haven't been great versus righties. StatCast data looks good. My worry is just really K rate, and that his FIP has been so much higher than his ERA. He's been decent. So in, I guess, consideration, but I don't love it. Kyle Harrison, I wish was a little bit cheaper here on FanDuel, but definitely intrigued. I think this matchup versus the Rockies is just great for him, and definitely will take some of him. And Chris Bassett. I think you got to consider Bassett in this spot as well at low ownership. So, I mean, really, there's a crew, 4 or 5 guys that I'm absolutely intrigued with. Maybe like 6, 7 guys that I'm intrigued on using, and good reason for all of them. So let's get into the stacks real quick. Get a little swig coffee here. We'll start on the FIP for the last 20. One of these days we'll start on it at least. All right, here we go. So Hunter Brown, highest FIP over the last 20, 5.54, 4.69 over his last 5. One thing I got to say about Brown, I think he's a better pitcher than what we have seen so far this year. Appears that he's coming around a little bit. I don't mind taking some shots on Hunter Brown. As far as a pitcher on DraftKings is like an SB2. Look, it's only an 8 total, -114 favorites for Houston. You could absolutely do worse than going to Brown. But this Milwaukee offense has been decent lately. They got a lot of guys you can use. You got some speed, you got some power. You kind of got it all in this offense. And if Hoskins is back, which I don't think he's going to be, I think he's out for a little while, like 1 to 2 weeks, something like that. But if he's back, looks much, much better. Definitely intrigued with Milwaukee. Now, our highest owned stack for today is all right, highest owned stack is KC with Atlanta right there. Remember, Atlanta does have the issue where that game may get rained out. Matt Waldron, however, is an interesting pitcher to go against. The reason being, and I've talked about this pretty much every time, is he is a knuckleballer. You just can't count on consistency with that pitch. It is either totally on or totally off pretty much. And when it's totally off, it is just batting practice. So I don't mind some Atlanta stacks if that game's going to look like it's playing, but also don't mind fading it a little bit. KC, it looks like it's going to be a bit of a bullpen game for Oakland. We still don't know who the starter is. I do expect Kyle Muller to pitch a decent amount of this game, and therefore I think it's a decent spot for KC, and I will definitely have some of them. Angels are popping up against Heaney a little bit. Heaney's been decent. Limited runs, not really striking guys out, but he's been all right. I don't love going to the Angels today, but they have got it done. Somehow this group of guys just keeps scoring some runs. I do think it's only a matter of time till that Angels wheel fall off. However, maybe Ron Washington is making that team just play a little bit better than what we've seen the last few years out of them once Trout gets hurt. Now, our highest projected stack, we got Dodgers. It is against Frankie Montas. Montas is coming off the IL, 5.51 FIP over his last 5. He has been pitching decently in some games here, but the splits are definitely in the favor of the Dodgers. I mean, Dodgers are always going to be one of the higher projected stacks, so no big surprise there. They are home. It's not in Great American Small Park, but definitely got to consider some Dodgers, especially if you use some of the back of the lineup guys, so that average stack price is a little bit lower. Milwaukee's also popping up. Fine with Milwaukee. I do think Hunter Brown's a decent pitcher, though, so I'm not going to go all in on them. but I will use them a little bit. Now, if we go to the value side, there's a lot of different ways we can go today on the value side. So I think this spot's interesting. And also, if you want to pay up, you probably want to use some of these. Okay, Mets versus Luzardo. Luzardo, 4.49 FIP over his last 5, 4 over his last 20. He can get hit. I don't hate trying to pick on him with a couple lineups. He can let some home runs, can let some hard contact go. It's a good matchup split-wise for the Mets. Angels, they're fine. Don't mind them. They're cheap, and they kind of keep getting it done, so I think they got to somewhat be in your pool. And those are really the only two popping up, so let's go to the ceiling plays here. And I do have to say that I think this slate is interesting because it's a giant slate, but 9 is the highest total, and that is Texas being minus 180 favorites. So these Texas stacks should be popping up, and they aren't now. So we need to understand that they could be going a little lower owned than they probably should be. Ceiling, Dodgers, Yankees. Clevenger's on the bump versus the Yankees. Now, he has been decent lately. We know he can have games where he can really put it together, but this Yankee offense is hitting pretty well right now. And I don't hate the idea of taking some good old Yanks today. Oakland versus Reagans is popping up. We've seen Reagans have a couple tough outings, so we know he can get hit. However, those tough outings, generally have been against better offenses than what Oakland is. Oakland has been very hot lately, though, so I got to throw that out there. I do think they're a little interesting, super low owned. I don't know if I would have full 5-man stacks of them, but I think smaller 2-3-man is very interesting. And let's click on the teams here to get our final look at everything. I love to look at this page just to give me a nice little overview of the slate. So our highest implied total, we got Texas, we got Royals, Dodgers, Toronto, Braves, Baltimore. So we didn't talk about Toronto. Toronto is an interesting spot. Tyler Alexander, 4.6 FIP over his last 5, 4.63 over his last 20, allowing a lot of hard contact. The bullpen is allowed a 4.44 ERA. I think Toronto is kind of an interesting stack that could go underlooked. Also, I got to throw out Texas there. Tyler Alexander is a decent pitcher, but 4.67 FIP over his last 5, 4.95 over his last 20. Alexander can have games where he really puts it together, but behind him, 5.1 ERA, 1.32 FIP. Team splits are in Texas' favor. I think they're very interesting. So Texas, Toronto, we didn't talk about. Baltimore, Bryce Miller's been very good this year. Don't love picking on him, but this Baltimore offense can get to everybody. Boston versus Kyle Gibson. Gibson, 3.29 FIP over his last 5 starts. Very, very good. The bullpen behind him is just mediocre. Clevenger, 5.27 FIP over his last 5, 3.93 over his last 20. I think that 3.98 number is better, and I did say 0.93. I just read it wrong. But 3.98 number is probably more who he is than this 5.27. I think the Yankees are interesting. White Sox bullpen's not great. Splits are good in his favor. They're going to go a little lower owned. Absolutely intrigued by there. Detroit's in an okay spot. I think Cleveland is interesting. The one thing is this Minnesota bullpen's been fairly good, and Simone Woods Richardson has been really good lately. 3.11 FIP over his last 5 starts. Has a little bit of a K rate. Don't love trying to pick on him, but this Cleveland offense just routinely gets it done. Andrew Heaney and the Angels. Bad bullpen behind Heaney. Mets, bad bullpen behind Luzardo. So I think those are your lower run total teams that are kind of interesting here. I also have to note that ownership should be spread out. you have your highest implied run total at 5 and 4.1, so only 0.9 run difference is teams that are going to be, way lower. In these implied run totals, like, you got to kind of consider them as Vegas's median, average. So just because a guy is, 4.1, it doesn't mean that they can be, or a team is 4.1, doesn't mean that they can't be the highest run total on this slate. So definitely intrigued by going to some of those lower ones today that are just going to go totally overlooked. So that'll do it for us today, guys. Have a good one. Good luck. Let's win some money. I will be back next week. Adios.